Hello, Torah sisters, we're back. My name is Amy K. Gunther, and if you're just popping up on this video, you haven't been watching these. Most of you have already been here, I know, but just bear with me for those of you who might be new. My name is Amy Gunther. I have a website called TorahSisters.com, and back in May, I had a retreat in Michigan, and so this is one of the talks, one of the workshops from that retreat, and you get to watch it with me. Over at TorahSisters.com, I have a whole bunch of free stuff. Go get all the free stuff. Load your shopping cart up with all the free download printables and enjoy. There's also a podcast and a blog. The best thing there at TorahSisters.com is the magazine. I'm gonna put links to everything below so you don't have to write it down. This is a print magazine. I will mail it to your home. Also, download the free retreat kit. The link is in the description. It has a lot of information that will be helpful to you as you watch these videos. Especially, I encourage you to watch these with other women, because watching it by yourself is nice and lovely and you will be encouraged, I know it. But watching it with others is so much more. It's so powerful to be with other women and talk and pray together. And now you'll have something to talk about because I'm giving you all these videos for free. So it gives you something to do and something to discuss. And so that is also, the link is below. This workshop is from Moutria. She is from TorahFamily.org, and this workshop is for those who are new to Torah. So even if you're not new to Torah, maybe you're old to Torah, you can still be, it's good to be refreshed about what it was like to be new and what people who are new might be going through and feeling and seeing out there on the internet. So I know you'll be blessed and challenged from Angela, so enjoy and visit her website, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Okay, welcome. I am Angela Moutria. I'm with Torah Family. This is geared towards our newbies, okay? So if you've been walking a while, maybe it'll be a refresher for you. Okay, so ladies, I'm here to say that following Torah really is simple. It is not that hard. It's only hard because we're excellent at making things hard. And all the instructions, yes, all of the instructions are just in one book. We don't have to go out spending oodles amount of time on the internet to search the Father's ways, or, ordering lots of books trying to figure it out. It's all in the scriptures, all in one location. But if it's that simple, so then why does it sometimes feel like it can be complicated? For most of us, it's the unlearning that we start to do. Unless you haven't been brought up in church doctrine. And then let me tell you, you really do have a huge advantage. Because we're coming from the theology where the law was done away with. And then we're finding ourselves learning to unlearn. The realization of what you thought you knew has now been turned upside down. And seeing there's so much more depth to our faith than what we first understood. All kinds of questions pop up and can be a bit overwhelming because you don't know what you don't know. And it kind of makes you feel like just erasing the slate and starting over again. And you know what? That is the best thing that you can do. A new slate, a new beginning. Start back in the scriptures from scratch and build upon Yeshua as your foundation. Believing in Him is going to keep you steady. And keeping Yeshua as our cornerstone is actually literally foundational. I would love for you all to, I've got a lot of scripture notes, scripture references for you to write down, so be prepared. We're going to start with Isaiah 28:16. Therefore, thus says Lord God, behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion, a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste. And Peter refers to this verse also in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 6. And he explains it as whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. Yeshua is our rock. He is our sure foundation. Teshuvah is our word for this week. To return back to the original state. When I realized the fullness of the scriptures were still for us today, for me, it was exactly like being born again. And that is the only way I can describe it. Because I had so much joy, just like when I was first saved. Who remembers that day? Not mine, but yours. Think back to it. Do you remember the day that you put your faith in him? How you felt? When you gave your heart to him, your life. To know his love was greater than any wrong I had done. It made me feel complete, made whole again. My slate was clean, and it was a new beginning. I had never doubted my salvation after giving my heart to him. But that same feeling I had when I was first saved is the only thing that I can compare to how I feel or felt when coming into Torah. And I wonder just how many of you have also felt that same way. My desire since giving my heart had always been to live right before God. And coming into Torah, as excited as I also was at a loss on just how to do that. I was ready to walk it, but I didn't know how. I remember Steve and I's first Sukkot. We had never camped together, much less for a full week. But I remember sitting down with those there and asking, how are we supposed to do this? And their wise answer was just walk through it. You can only start with what you know. And if any of you are in that place today, I hope this week together has actually helped you, because it can be a pretty frustrating place to be in. There are basically 4 areas which our walk being Torah pursuant looks a little bit different than the mainstream church. It's the Sabbath, Yahweh's appointed times, dietary laws, and tzitzit. These next 2 verses are really at the heart of why we keep them. It's Deuteronomy 7:9. Know therefore that Yahweh your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. And Numbers 15:15. For the assembly there shall be one statute for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you, a statute forever throughout your generations. You and the sojourner shall be alike before Yahweh. One law and one rule shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. You'll find over and over the phrase throughout all your generations in the scriptures concerning the commandments. So the first area of the 4 is Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So looking back, Shabbat for me was the hardest to figure out. What do I do? What can I do? And how do I do it? I saw others doing things that honestly just seemed awkward, even weird. And I understand there are great meanings behind some traditions, but I was still getting used to hearing that one Hebrew phrase everyone said. Go ahead. Shabbat Shalom. That was even strange for me. So trying to learn how to observe Shabbat, we need to avoid the pitfall of comparison. I had fallen into this pitfall and was looking at lots of traditions not found in Scripture, and it was a bit confusing because I was thinking, was I missing something? What was I not understanding in His Word? I felt it shouldn't be that hard to understand. You have these people doing this, and you have other people doing that. And then some people just didn't do anything. Well, did you know what Yahweh did? He had Moses write these few verses down just for me. Yeah, I swear, it's just for me. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 10 through 11. When you obey the voice of Yahweh your God to keep his commandments and his statutes that are written in this book of the law, when you turn to Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul, for this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. Yahweh reinforced to me that it's not too hard and it's not too complicated to keep his commandments and his statutes that are written in the book of the law. Two important key points here are, first, with all your heart and with all your soul. And second, what is written in the book of the law. The simplicity of following his law is what's written and nothing else. And when you marry that with the desire to follow with everything that you are, you'll find even in the hardest challenges that you'll come up against, you will have challenges. Your decision to follow is not going to be too hard. Looking at how others were celebrating Shabbat outside the scripture was my frustration. Now, that being said, I don't think traditions are wrong. There are all kinds of meaningful traditions, and some of them are just quite beautiful, and others are just downright fun. In fact, you'll find a lot of great ideas within the Torah Sisters magazine and with other ministries that are here this week. But I want to ask, between you and Yahweh, are they necessary? Traditions are great for us only if they're going to add shalom, not if they take it away. In fact, I love to buy flowers for Shabbat. It's my little tradition. When first coming into Torah, I had read where many Jewish families would bring fresh flowers home on the eve of Shabbat. And I thought that was a beautiful idea. For me, there's just something about flowers that brings calmness, a little bit of Yahweh's creation coming in from the outdoors. They're nice, but they're not necessary. Of course not. And this is how I look at traditions. I may go months without getting any flowers because it wouldn't bring me shalom to look at them all weekend if I had to buy them on credit. So what I found is too often people don't feel that they're doing it right because they look at the way others are doing it. It's the pitfall of comparison. And it's the one pitfall that we can allow ourselves to fall into pretty easily. Recently, a friend of mine reached out asking for some pointers concerning Shabbat. She was hosting a Shabbat dinner in her home for the first time. Well, she had never been to anyone's home to celebrate Shabbat and thought maybe there was something expected from her that she didn't know about. She had watched some things online, like lighting candles and such, but thought she'd feel awkward doing it for the first time, seeming like it was the normal observance. Well, I just shared with her what I love. I love going to someone else's home and experiencing how they keep Shabbat. I told her, don't change up a thing. Just relax, rest. It's Shabbat. Your fellowship will be a lot sweeter. Leviticus 23:3. This is all that's required. 6 days shall work be done, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwelling places. So she was joking and went on to say, so glad I didn't have to learn a bunch of new stuff. So watching all the videos had stressed her out because she started overthinking that maybe she should be doing those things. And maybe some of you have felt the same way. No work and rest. It really can be that simple. And that means no one working for you either. Think, if everyone kept Sabbath, if no one is working, then you'll find no one is buying either. Just a thought. The hardest thing for me as a mom, though, has been saying no to my children to attend events with their friends that require others to work. Thankfully, that's a little bit less as my children have gotten older, but we still have challenges that come our way. So let's avoid the pitfall of comparison, though. It brings the exact opposite of shalom. And let's be careful to not allow the "you don't know what you don't know" mentality to carry you away. So my friend had 2 days of craziness and laughed afterwards about how nutty it was. We just need to stick to the instruction book, which is the scriptures. If people's traditions add more stress, remember, they're not necessary. And I think you'll find taking your eyes off others' walk, you'll have a much more peaceful stroll yourself. Now, don't misunderstand me, because we do need our community of like-minded believers, and because we can really help each other out through discussion and sharing others' understandings. But what I am saying is test what you hear. Seek to understand scriptures that guide your walk in Torah. Like in my case, if something doesn't add up to what you would see others doing, then there's probably a reason why. Perhaps it just isn't necessary. So would you agree that the hardest thing about this walk is the differing opinions on how to walk it? And we all have them, even me. I want to share an article from D.L. Moody on the observance of the Sabbath. He was the founder of the Moody Institute and lived between 1837 and 1899. And this is what he wrote in his book, Weighed and Wanting, about the fourth commandment. He says, "I honestly believe that this commandment is just as binding today as it ever was. I have talked with men who have said that it has been abrogated, but they have never been able to point to any place in the Bible where God repealed it. When Christ was on earth, he did nothing to set it aside. He freed it from the traces under which the scribes and Pharisees had put it and gave it its true place. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath." It's in Mark chapter 2. It is just as practicable and as necessary for men today as it ever was. In fact, more than ever, because we live in such an intense age. He said that back then. I'm like, if he knew what we were living today. The Sabbath was binding in Eden, and it has been in force ever since. The fourth commandment begins with the word remember, showing that the Sabbath already existed when God wrote the law on the tables of stone at Sinai. How can men claim that this one commandment has been done away with when they will admit that the other 9 are still binding? So he was and is a huge influence in Christian history. The impact of his life has been great, stretching across several generations. We often wonder how those before us have not seen the scriptures as we do today. But I think there were more than what we realize that may have, just like Moody. How can men claim? This was his question. It's the same question we ask today. So why do you think Yahweh instructs us to keep it? Look at Exodus chapter 20, verses 10 and 11. Why does Yahweh declare the Sabbath holy and set apart? The reason it's set apart, it says, "But the seventh day is a Sabbath to Yahweh your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates." Verse 11 is the reason. "For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So from the very beginning, we see it was set apart. Now, what is the purpose that we keep it? I thought it was only that, because Yahweh had set it apart. So he rested, and that's why we rest. But it's more than that. Read Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Yahweh your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore Yahweh your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Also, Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 12. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies them. And also in Exodus 31:13, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, Yahweh, again, sanctifies you. And verse 14 continues with giving instruction and just how long we should keep observing it, all the way through 16. Therefore, the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. Every Shabbat, Yahweh wants us to remember his deliverance that he gives us. It's a time of refreshing our relationship with him. It's a holy convocation. We are remembering his steadfast love and showing our love back to him by walking in obedience. There's even a psalm for the Sabbath. It's Psalm 92. In it, you're going to find giving thanks, declaring his works, exalting him, testifying of his love, righteousness, and his deliverance from our enemies. He set apart Israel from Egypt and made them holy as a separate people, just like he set apart the Sabbath day from the other days, making it holy, thus distinguishing the common from the uncommon. So Hebrews 4:9 says, so then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. The bigger question for us isn't if we should observe it, but how. As I shared earlier, no work or others to work for you, and you rest. Now I know what all of you are thinking. You're asking, what constitutes work? You want to go there, don't you? But remember, his instructions are not too hard. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the definition of work, because you're going to test it out in the scriptures. Instead, I'm going to give you a gazillion scripture references to write down. I'll touch on and expound on a few of them. But I want you to take them. I want you to look at them, the whole picture of what's going on. What these verses are saying, what's happening surrounding them. And it's going to help you decide what work really is. So let's start with Exodus chapter 16, verse 23. He said to them, this is what Yahweh has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to Yahweh. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept until morning. So they laid it aside till the morning as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. So I just have this question. What was the baking and boiling instructed for? Exodus 16:25. Moses said, eat it today, for today is Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you will not find it in the fields. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. I just want you to take note here. There's no gathering on the Sabbath. Exodus 16:29. See, Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the 7th day. Why are they to remain in their place? Simply telling them not to go out and gather. Compare it to Leviticus 23:3, which states it as a holy convocation. And then Matthew 12, verse 1. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. So we have to look at all of these verses in context to determine, because we can take one of these verses and go with it, and it just ruins what the Father really has for us. Exodus 35:2. 6 days' work shall be done, but on the seventh day you shall have a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire in all your dwelling places on the Sabbath day. In context, I want you to look at Moses is speaking to the congregation of Israel immediately before instructing them to do the work on the tabernacle. Isaiah 58:13. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of Yahweh honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly. The Septuagint reads, if thou shalt not lift up their foot to work, nor speak a word in anger out of the mouth. This isn't about not having fun, but instead working and being angry, perhaps even being angry because it's a Sabbath. These few verses are concerning the land. Leviticus 25, verse 4, a Sabbath rest for the land. Leviticus 25, verse 6, is where the land provides food during the Sabbath time. These next verses are concerning the permissible work of the priests. Matthew 12:5, Yeshua says, or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? Numbers 28:9 talks about the burnt offerings offered on every Sabbath. Leviticus 24:8 talks about Aaron arranging to Yahweh regularly. 1 Chronicles 9:32, the Kohathites, they had charge of the showbread, and they prepared it every Sabbath. 2 Chronicles 23:4, the Levites came off duty on the Sabbath, and 1/3 of them shall be the gatekeepers. And here's some verses concerning the working. Numbers 15:32. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. That's the one that I think most of us actually think about. They ended up putting him to death. Nehemiah 10:31 talks about bringing in goods or other grain on the Sabbath day to sell. And they actually forego the crops of the 7th year. This here isn't even about buying on the Sabbath, but solely relates back to gathering the crops on the Sabbath year. Nehemiah 13:15 through 22 gives you a picture. You have people treading wine presses on the Sabbath, bringing in heaps of grain and loading them, also wine, grapes, figs, all kinds of loads. They're brought in, and all kinds of goods are sold on the Sabbath, and it's all profaning the Sabbath day. Nehemiah wrote that no load might be brought in. The Levites, they purified themselves and guarded the gates to keep the Sabbath day holy. Jeremiah 17:21 through 24. I told you I was going to give you a lot of scriptures. Do not bear a burden on the Sabbath day or bring it in to the gates of Jerusalem. Do not carry a burden out of your houses or do any work. And that goes on through Jeremiah 17 through 24. Matthew 12:1 is Yeshua. They began to pluck the heads of grain to eat, and the Pharisees said that's unlawful. Matthew 12:10. Yeshua says, which one of you has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Mark 16:1. This is where Mary Magdalene, they bought the spices after the Sabbath was passed. And John 5:9, the Pharisees, the Jews said, it's the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to take up your bed. I want you to read all of these in context. John 7:22. Even Yeshua says, if on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Now, you can take all those verses home and chew on them. We're going to move on to the second area of the 4. It's the appointed times of Yahweh. And that most of them are found in Leviticus chapter 23. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed feasts of Yahweh that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. They are my appointed feasts. And this pitfall, it can lead to calendar confusion. I bet you're glad you're not me right now. There's many different calendars calculating what the Hebrew months and days are. And we see people celebrating on all different days, and it can be a bit disheartening. And I'm not here to tell you which calendar to follow. There are many various reasons why people choose the calendar they do. I can only vouch for the one that I follow, and if you're curious about that one, it's found on our website, torahfamily.org, by searching calendar. Steve has 2 teachings on it. One is none other than calendar confusion, and the other one is the calendar updated and expanded, if you wanted to check that out. But regardless of what calendar you follow, or the person next to you follows, instead of getting disheartened because we're not all together, turn it into prayer. Let our Elohim know how long we long for Yeshua's return. One day he's going to be teaching what's right and what's true, and we're all going to be doing it together. And in the meantime, take a moment to reflect on how so many are passionate to try and keep Yahweh's appointed times as best as they know how. So soften your judgment and turn it into thankfulness instead. The appointed times are found in Leviticus 23, but also in Deuteronomy 16. And you can write these down. Shabbat is 23, verse 3. And we just covered all those scripture verses, so you have your homework for that one. One tradition that my husband loves is for me to make challah bread on Shabbat, though I don't make it as often as he'd like. We have Passover, also known as Pesach, Leviticus 23, verse 5. Passover is a meal and not a full day. It's to be eaten on the 14th day of the first month at evening, before dark, which starts the 15th day, and is also the first day of the unleavened bread. The simplicity of this meal is to memorialize it with lamb or goat, unleavened bread, and eating with bitterness, thus being the bitter herbs, and to teach our children how Yahweh brought Israel out of Egypt. We have the unleavened bread week, Leviticus 23, verses 6 through 8, and Deuteronomy 16, verses 1 through 8. It's also referred to Passover week. The first and last days are non-work days and holy convocations. We should not eat any leavened breads or have any in our homes. And I just wrote an article on this month giving more detail with the Hebrew words concerning yeast and leaven. You can find it on our website if you searched yeast. Or let me know and I can email you the link. Shavuot is our next one. Leviticus 23, verses 10 through 21, and also Deuteronomy 16, verses 9 through 12. It's a non-work day and holy convocation. It's also known as first fruits. Leviticus 23:14 states, throughout all your generations. Trumpets is our next one, also known as Yom Teruah. Leviticus 23, verses 24 and 25. It's a non-work day and holy convocation. Some memorialize it with shofars and shouting, giving praise to the Father. Numbers 10, verse 8 states also, throughout all your generations. And we have Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23, verses 27 through 32. It's a non-work day and holy convocation, and most memorialize with fasting because it's a day of humbling. We like to gather together towards the end of the day instead of the beginning, to bring the fast together. Leviticus 23:31 states, throughout all your generations. Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. This is my favorite feast of the year. It's found in Leviticus 23, verses 34 through 36, and 39 through 43, and Deuteronomy 16, verses 13 through 15. The first and eighth days are non-work days and holy convocations. The first day we're to take good fruit and branches from the land and live in temporary dwellings for the 7 days. But no one is required to leave their homes for the week to go camping, 10 states away. We just like to do that. We just love the fellowship. Leviticus 23:41. I know. It also states, throughout all your generations. These are the appointed feasts of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 16 through 17 goes on to say, 3 times a year the males appear before Yahweh during the feasts of unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And they're not to appear empty-handed, each one according to his ability. Now this pertains to the offerings that's ascribed, which we're unable to carry out until Yeshua establishes the priesthood and temple services again. So the third area is the dietary laws. This can lead into the confusion of eating biblically clean versus kosher. Did you know you don't have to eat kosher? Many don't understand what the word kosher means. The Hebrew word kosher literally means fit or proper. Foods which are certified kosher defines they are fit for consumption for a Jew, and the ingredients are biblically clean. But rabbis are hired to oversee the ingredients and production of the processing plant in order for that particular company to stamp the certified kosher symbol on their products. So you have a kosher kitchen where milk and meat are kept separate. You have kosher utensils. Kosher slaughter is where the animal has been killed a certain way. And then you have koshering meat. Most people think eating kosher is just eating biblically clean. In reality, it's also abiding by the Jewish dietary laws that include the way certain foods are eaten with one another. Eating kosher isn't necessarily a pitfall in itself. It's a very healthy way of eating. It's only a pitfall if that's what you feel you're required to do. Remember, we're talking about the simplicity of following Torah. Leviticus chapter 11, the whole chapter, 1 through 47, is where you're going to find the biblical dietary laws. This entire chapter explains the animals that are good to eat and those that are forbidden. The animals that are included are mammals that chew their cud and have split hooves, fish with fins and scales, and then certain birds. They are what we would describe as biblically clean foods. along with all seed-bearing plants. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food." So you don't need to worry if there's a food not stamped with the kosher symbol. It just means they haven't paid a rabbi to come to examine their facility. And you can check out all the ingredients to determine for yourself. The fourth area, tzitzit. Numbers chapter 15, verse 38. "Speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner." Well, obviously you already know where I stand on this one. Why did Yahweh tell us to wear these? It's no secret. He explains clearly. There's no vision given as in John the Revelator. Yahweh keeps it simple and to the point. Verse 39, "And it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of Yahweh, to do them, not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which you are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember and do all my commandments and be holy to your God." He wants to help us. He wants us to walk so we may have the fullness of his blessings. And that is the instruction for the tzitzit. I think there's a lack of confidence which many women have as to wear or not to wear. These are questions that some do have. Is this instruction just for men or for women and children too? Does it matter how they're made, colors used, and how should we attach them? See how complicated we make things? I have a teaching online that actually breaks down all of those questions. It's called Women and Tzitzit, and I encourage you to look it up because it's going to go into more detail than what I can do here today. So why the confusion, though? Some of it stems from just that pitfall of comparison again. We look at the Jewish culture here and see how they're walking it out. First, we see Jewish men, but not Jewish women wearing them. Although it's generally agreed by rabbis that women are not prohibited from wearing them, it's not encouraged mostly because of traditional custom. Second, we see them worn mostly on Shabbat and not the rest of the week by the majority of Jewish men who do wear them. Third, some choose to not wear them simply because their clothing doesn't have four corners. And fourth, an even smaller number of Jews who wear them actually have the cord of blue that's instructed. But let's take a look at the verse again. "Speak to the people," which is B'nai of Israel. "Tell them to make tassels on the corners of the garments throughout their generations. Put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner." B'nai, this instruction is for all the sons, children, people of Israel. You'll find in context, it's all the people who are Israel. Those who believe they're grafted in, and remember there is one law for all. Make a tassel with blue through it. It doesn't say what the other colors need to be, and that's why you'll find many who have all kinds of colors. Attach it. It doesn't say how to attach it, so attach it by any means to the four corners. I attach mine to hang where my four seams come together. One more reason, this is what I think. There are many people choosing to not wear tzitzit. It's because they're afraid of offending the Jews. As with any instruction we are given to follow, we do have to make a choice to follow him or to follow man. And with that being said, don't take my word only either. Go home, research it for yourself so you can be confident in what you choose and how you choose to walk out this instruction. So in closing, it all started with Abraham, all because of one man's obedience. Genesis chapter 26, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Think of how Yahweh must feel as we choose to walk as Abraham walked, with the heart of obedience. Yahweh's character has never changed. What pleased him then pleases him now. Our obedience is showing our love for him. Salvation has always been walked out in obedience because of our love for him. Even in mainstream Christianity, it's believed you'll act, aka walk, a certain way if you are saved. We follow Torah because we believe. Yahweh's Torah brings life. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your God, which I command you today, and the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of Yahweh your God, but turn aside from the way that I am commanding you today, to go after other gods that you have not known. Deuteronomy 30:19. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live. His blessings are always for us to prosper, if we choose. And it's for each of us to do so. So thank you for being here. And may Yahweh go with you.